First of all, let me take this opportunity to thank the Salata Institute and many schools of the Howard University for hosting and welcoming us here this week. I've certainly enjoyed many of the sessions and presentations. And also, thank you very much for allowing us to talk about a very exciting and very interesting project in Bangladesh, where SoulShare is implementing the microgrid. However, before we get into the project and Sebastian comes on and gives us a little bit more details about the project itself, let me try to set up a little bit of a context and where we are and how we have come up with this project. Many of you know Bangladesh. It's a population of about 165 million people. But what is not often known is that it's one of the most densely populated countries in the world, where we have over 1,300 people per square kilometer. Compared to that, in the US, we have 37. So you can see the difference between the two countries. The silver lining here, really, and more important to the climate change initiatives, is that we have 70% of the working population under the age of 28. That gives Bangladesh a great advantage for the demographic dividend, not only to help transform its economy, but also provide reskilling and retooling opportunities, perhaps to meet the needs of some 20, 30 million jobs that will be coming about specifically related to climate. In terms of its economy, most of you are very familiar that since its independence, some 50 years ago, Bangladesh has progressed very well in the sense that the current GDP stands at about $460 billion. The economy has been growing at about 6% for the past 10 years. And there's every indication that the economy will continue to grow, and has been estimated by many of the think tanks and some of the consulting houses that the economy in Bangladesh could cross a 1 trillion mark by 2030. So what are some of the major initiatives that we need to know about in terms of climate change and where we are today in Bangladesh? First of all, the government of Bangladesh has taken a tremendous effort in terms of improving its transport infrastructure and the energy. Some $60 billion have either been spent or committed in that effort. We have the Smart Bangladesh vision for 2041, which will transform the country's economy and adopt new technologies, in addition to bridging the digital divide that we see today. And very interestingly enough, the country will be celebrating a historic milestone in 2026 when it will graduate from an LDC to a developing country status, according to the United Nations. So where do we go from here? In terms of the investments made in the energy sector, it is very important that more investments are made in Bangladesh, including in the solar sector, whereby for every 200 megawatts that the country puts into installation and use, the country stands to save at least $1 billion from its economy. And those resources can be used forward to make further investments in the climate change. Before Sebastian comes on and talks more about the project that he's been working on for the past 10 years and the successes that he has had, let me share with you 2 or 3 key facts about Bangladesh and how it is withstanding on the frontier of climate change. According to the United Nations, it is estimated that by year 2050, some 20% of the population, this could amount to anywhere between 30 to 40 million people, will be displaced due to rising seawaters. And that's quite significant. The FAO estimates that on any given year, during the wet seasons and monsoons, we lose about 20 to 70% of the landmass at some point in time, which is totally submerged in water. This is why some 15% of the agricultural land remains into chronic drought. Finally, the Asian Development Bank has estimated that anywhere between 1.5 to 2% of the country's GDP is lost every year due to climate. With this backdrop and with this context, it is very important that projects like SoulShares in developing the grid, the power grid in Bangladesh should be promoted, and we need to learn more from the great work that people like Sebastian are doing here in Bangladesh. Before I bring on Sebastian, we hope to receive a few questions from you, and hopefully we'll be able to answer them as we complete this presentation today. I know it's very late in Dhaka. It's probably past midnight, but let me introduce Sebastian, who will then continue onto the presentations going forward. Hi, Sebastian.
Thanks a lot, Munir, and also thanks, Lindy. Thanks to the Harvard Climate Action Week for having us here. And I think Munir did an excellent job just to describe both things, the economic empowerment of Bangladesh, but also what it is struggling with when it comes to the adverse effects of climate change. And I think there's nobody better to put it here as the Minister of the Environment, Sava Hossain Chaudhry, who said, look, we have to become a leader in the fight against climate change rather than just remaining a victim. And I think this is a very important statement, and it shows a bit also the ambition of the country. And I think Munir certainly overpraised SoulShares here, but to a very small extent, we are trying to also push for this leadership position. In 2015, we installed what is today referred to as the world's first solar peer-to-peer trading microgrid. What does it mean? To be honest, back then when we installed it, we didn't know what it is. We certainly didn't know what a peer-to-peer grid is. That came later, that jargon. But what we saw is, and what brought me to Bangladesh 10 years ago was, I'm originally from Germany, which is often hailed as one of the leaders of the energy transformation. And when I came to Bangladesh, Germany had about 2 million rooftop solar systems, and Bangladesh had twice as many. So I was taught in school that solar is expensive. It's for rich people. And here is Bangladesh, arguably one of the poorer countries, who seems to have deployed twice as many as Germany. So I wanted to find out more. So as part of my PhD, I ventured into this. And what we saw is that there were millions of solar home systems distributed, and that some very smart people came up with a scheme how to distribute them in a fairly cost-effective way. But what we also saw is that at about 3-4 p.m. in any house I went, the batteries were full, but the sun was still shining. And so we did some calculations, and over the millions of solar home systems, we found out that about $1 billion worth of energy, which was curtailed because the batteries were full, was absolutely wasted every year. And $1 billion for these rural villages is a hell lot of money. On a broader scheme of the country, it's also significant, but for the rural areas, it's very much so. So what we came up with, we interconnected the solar home systems physically, so that when a battery is full, it would automatically start selling to a battery which is not full yet, or even to a house which couldn't afford a solar home system of its own and would only have a battery and then the appliances. And so build a marketplace where people can buy and sell electricity, and only later it was labeled as peer-to-peer. The interesting part is Bangladesh has almost reaches everywhere with mobile money. So what we managed to do is to integrate that peer-to-peer grid with the mobile money network of the country and with the people, which meant that as early as 2015, people's solar home systems would sell electricity. They would get the money onto their phone and could buy rice in the local market with that money, which I think is pretty astonishing, thinking that this was as early as 2015. And that's what I mean by this leadership, because since then, solar peer-to-peer grids have popped up all over the place. I think this is important. But I want to speak about more of the future, and I would almost ask you, which vehicle do you prefer here? The shiny Tesla on the left, or the very colorful Besla, as we call the Bangladeshi version of our electric vehicles on the right. And before you make a judgment which vehicle you want to purchase today, let me give you a bit of a background. So Tesla has sold between 4 and 5 million vehicles so far in the whole world. And these Beslas, as we refer to them in Bangladesh, we also have 4 to 5 million. So in other words, the roads of Bangladesh are applying as many vehicles, as many EVs as Tesla has sold in the whole world. But those vehicles are actually all productive because they are all taxis. They are the backbone of the transportation sector of the entire country. They cater to the livelihood of tens of millions of people and transport about 100 million people. So that's very, very significant. So when we talk EV, we shouldn't automatically always think car. These three-wheelers are actually, when we combine this with India and some other countries in Sub-Saharan Africa and in Southeast Asia, the real revolution in EV is not cars. It's 2 and 3-wheelers. And that's important when we think about the EV space. So what we're doing here is we wanted to get one step further from the peer-to-peer grids. And what we found is that where globally the EV is hailed as a puzzle piece in the fight against climate change, in the case of Bangladesh, which has fairly weak national grid infrastructures, it's actually quite a burden. So those 4 or 5 million vehicles all charge right now at the same time and actually bring the grid regularly to its knees. So what we did is, from the same concept of the microgrid, we put our intelligence into the batteries of those vehicles so we can shift the demand from all charging at 8 p.m., which is peak load in Bangladesh, to midnight when there is less pressure on the grid. And then we're just doing the first pilot to go one step further, even from that, and say, when the vehicles come into the garages, and that's a big difference to the Tesla, nobody parks here his vehicle or her vehicle in his own private house because there's no space for that and there's no security for that. So it's always an accumulation of 50, 100 vehicles. So what we did now is, if I have 50, 100 vehicles and you see all these batteries in these pictures here, can I combine all that battery storage and make it available to the grid? Meaning at 8 p.m. when the grid needs power, feed it in and then buy it back when it's cheaper at midnight. In essence, a virtual power plant or a virtual solar utility, because we have also rooftop solar on those garages. And lastly, and I think that's the astonishing part, with this storage combination of 4 or 5 million people, there is the potential to buffer 30% of the peak load of the entire country. Usually when we talk about these microgrids, these off-grids, it's not really making a dent in the country, right? But it's the law of large numbers. So we have so many vehicles, so many batteries, it can actually make a significant impact. And those batteries will be used as an additional business case. They don't need to be purchased just for storage, which makes till today the renewables fairly expensive. So I think this is a really concept for the future, concept for now. The future is now for this. But why can't this happen in Bangladesh? Why can't the future of energy not be started in a country like Bangladesh? So that's kind of the question I want to put out there. And the challenge often is that people don't know about it. And it's one of the reasons why Munir and I are here today, to tell you about these stories. And what I mean they don't know about it, if you look at the data in terms of investment, and if we just focus what is highlighted here in light green, Bangladesh's funding per capita is about 92 cents. The US is $1,400. India is $28. There is a huge opportunity here because it's very much under invested. So it's a huge capital arbitrage opportunity here. And we just need to become aware and stop thinking that innovation and new things will necessarily always come from the developed markets. Let me finish with one sentence. If I'm day in, day out confronted with climate change, and I know what it means to live in that circumstances, I come up with good solutions, because the closer I'm to a problem, the better of a fix I come up with. And I wanted to stop with that and give the floor back to Lindy, as well as share the slide for the Q&A, because Munir and I think we really would like to be eager to answer some questions. Thank you very much again to the Salata Institute and the Harvard Climate Action Week.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. That was really eye-opening and interesting. We do have one question. It is, looking at the challenges we're still facing against climate change, how can we ensure the growth of climate solutions that will turn the tide and help us solve this crisis? So I turn it to both of you.
Sebastian, why don't you take that on?
Okay, so I think one important thing is, if we look for climate solutions, what I think we should not do is to think that we will find one big swinging idea which will rescue us all and just rely on it. We can also bet on this, but not only. I would much rather want to see that we support thousands, tens, thousands, hundreds of thousands of climate entrepreneurs who come from the global south, who face those problems every day, and support those with solutions that work today.
I would agree, Sebastian. I think the only thing I'd like to add to that is that countries like Bangladesh, which are at the front line of climate change, can provide a unique opportunity, not only for entrepreneurs, but also investors to come out and to be part of this journey. We have today great opportunities, not only in climate change, but also other technologies that can be brought to Bangladesh. And I think I'd like to echo Sebastian's views that solutions not always come from the south. Not always come from the north, but also from the south. So we certainly look forward to that partnership and to that engagement.
Thank you. We have one more question. Is the Bangladeshi approach to the solar, so the Besla vehicles that you were highlighting, is that approach demonstrating measurable progress in greenhouse gas reductions for the country of Bangladesh?
Straight out answer, no, it's not. And there's reasons for that, because the grid is still heavily dominated by fossil fuels. We're talking up to 97%, which is gas, coal, and HFO. So, and that's often overlooked, right? If I have an electric vehicle, that is only one part of the equation. If I put dirty energy into it, I solve the exhaust problem, which is a big issue in Dhaka in terms of air pollution. So there it has a big impact. But in terms of CO2 mitigation, not yet. For this, we need massively more solar and wind in the grid mix. Otherwise, the EV alone won't do the trick.
Thank you. The last question is more of a compliment to you both, which is that your presentation is incredibly interesting, and I absolutely agree. I have a question for you both. What can a university like Harvard, what can an organization like the Climate Action Accelerator do to amplify this climate solution?
Well, let me take this one, and then Sebastian can add to this. I think as an alum of this great university, this is a tremendous platform that we can come together with the university and different schools. We can discuss our issues in given countries. We can talk about the opportunities that are there. And I think raising awareness and perhaps working with select professors and other schools to do specific research in terms of raising solutions and to bring it to fruition. I think this is one of the most important areas where universities like Harvard can play, and we look forward to that partnership going forward. Sebastian, I don't know if you add to that. What can universities bring?
Let me try, because you basically said it, but let me just add one bit. I mean, it is an incredible platform, right? And people listen to Harvard. So I showed that very briefly, that capital arbitrage slide, right? So anything that Harvard can do to increase the capital flow to these kind of markets, which are underrepresented, but which have great talent, which have climate solutions that work today, I think would bring us forward in the fight against climate change much more than relying always on the same usual suspects.
Right.